Catholic Puberty and How Murphy Discovered Girls, Episode 95. I am Rod Murphy, and this is Growing Up Poor in Irish Boston, a series of my 1950s-era Irish and Boston songs, poems, history, jokes, and stories. Unlike today in 2026, the Roman Catholic Church of 1943 in Boston, the year I entered kindergarten, was powerful, dogmatic, and required its members to be diligent in practicing their faith or face eternal damnation. Those of us who were a little more free-thinking grumbled a little, but we got in line finally. I attended a Cambridge Catholic school run by drill sergeant type Notre Dame de Namur sisters. From my first kindergarten school day to my graduation day 9 years later, I was taught about what sin is and that I must avoid it. We learned the 7 sacraments, the 10 commandments, each classroom sister's rules, and all the prayers. All of that to avoid that eternal damnation. Sins like missing Sunday or Holy Day Mass, stealing, using God's name in vain, and cursing, telling lies, hurting or killing people, worshiping false gods, and lots about coveting my neighbor's wife and other bad things. I was completely uninterested in girls until the 7th and 8th grade. We boys were specifically inundated with prohibitions against sex. Sometimes my Protestant boyhood friends would ask, what's it like going to a parochial school, and what sins we were supposed to avoid. My wise-ass remarks to those questions often included some comments, something like this. Quote, it's a sin to miss Mass on Sunday, to tell lies, to fool around with girls, to shoplift, to use 4-letter words. Come to think of it, everything else that felt good was a sin too. Unquote. Despite my complaints, I did believe in my Catholic faith. I still do. But it ain't easy being a Roman Catholic. When I was 11 or 12, I began to see girls in a new light. Perhaps they weren't those inferior creatures put on earth by God to tattletale on me or otherwise vex me. That had been my sad history so far, with neighborhood girls and my 5 sisters. I was beginning to poob, and I had begun to have some strange new feelings about girls. I began to notice that some local girls had developed bumps and curves, and I kind of liked that. I myself was changing. I was growing hair in funny places. I was getting taller, and my voice had gotten deeper. I was in the 7th grade at Blessed Sacrament School on Pearl Street in Cambridge at the time. I was thoroughly indoctrinated and knew that my new feelings were going to get me in trouble with the nuns and with God. The school was laid out with 2 classrooms for each grade, one for the girls and one for the boys. There was a windowed swinging door into the opposite gender's classroom at the back of each classroom. I maneuvered to get a peek into the girls' classroom whenever I could. The sisters were fully in charge and on guard for such maneuvers. I was caught a few times. It was verboten. Even looking at girls was a sin, I guess. I remember all my crushes. The first girl that I noticed in my new mindset was Lorna B. She sometimes walked in front of me on the way to school, thereby giving me a view of those changing physical features. By the way, there were no pansy school buses in Boston. Students walked to school. At that time, the sisters were trying to get the boys to consider the priesthood. There were well-organized visits to our school from priestly orders like the Mary Knowles and the Redemptorists. They were recruiting baby wannabe priests for the 7th and 8th grade from the 7th and 8th grade Blessed Sacrament boys. I was leaning towards it. I thought I would like the possible adventure of saving souls in a darkest Africa jungle. But after viewing Lorna B's backside, I began to backslide. Celibacy and a possible Father Murphy soon transmogrified into just plain lust. I decided to eliminate celibacy in my future without even knowing what it meant. By the eighth grade, I had developed my first crush on a girl. Her name was Stephanie M. She was in the same grade, but of course she was in the off-limits classroom. Thinking back on my confusion about this crush, I reacted by doing research regarding the street where she lived. I knew her father's name, so rudimentary research involved just using the phone book. I find it nostalgic that in my later adult business life, the researching of people and businesses, kind of like I did as a 12-year-old muttonhead, became a much more expert mainstay in my entrepreneurial life. So I started walking down Stephanie's street on weekends, hoping, I guess, to meet her, sort of by accident. That never worked, of course, and I went on to Cambridge Latin High School that September. Pardon the short break. I hope you are enjoying my Growing Up Poor in Irish Boston podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps to get my message to more folks. And no animals were injured or killed in the making of this podcast. And now back to our episode. At Latin school, rather than algebra and Latin being a prominent part of my learning processes, girls were instead. I developed my own non-credit course, Broads 101. I quietly studied girls. My study, like any other high school course, was done as I went to classes. I watched the girls. I listened to them. I cogitated about them. And I spoke to them at every opportunity. I discovered that there were different kinds of Latin school young women. For example, the home economics course girls, or the secretarial course girls, or the college course girls. These categories had different habits and interests. There were also several subcategories, the prom queens, the quiz ed types, and the airheads. Yet most of my female classmates were just quiet and boring girls. Women and girls seemed to naturally form cliques among themselves, while men and boys do not. Usually males find a buddy or maybe two, but not a gang. At Latin school, a clique was formed of former Blessed Sacrament girls. My first crush, Stephanie M., was in that clique. That group met at lunch and before and after school. Lots of laughing, pointing at the boys, and whispering went on. The boys that interested most girls were what you would expect. The football heroes, the class officers, the well-dressed boys, and of course, the blonde, blue-eyed, handsome kids. As far as I know, Murphy was invisible to that clique and to most other girls too. There was one girl in the school that caused confession-grade fantasies and slobbering among every male in the school. Heartthrob Emily Banks was a year ahead of me and absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. She was in my Latin American relations class and sat next to me. I was not able to put a sentence together for the whole school year in my attempts to talk to her. I was thoroughly smitten. She later became a Rheingold girl and then a Hollywood actor. And a different kind of girl caught my attention when I was a sophomore. I was flunking Latin after flunking Latin 1 and therefore repeating it. There was a freshman girl in my class, Elaine K. She was blonde, Polish, blue-eyed, barely pubed, and beautiful. Although I was attracted to her, her naivete and innocence caused me to feel protective of her. I never even flirted with her. I think it was my natural male instinct that I protect women and children. She was both of those. As a junior, third year for those of you in Southie, I decided that I was going to set up and experience a real date with a real girl. To me, it was a needed rite of passage. Elaine V. was a relatively attractive girl who seemed to be not in big demand, sort of like me. I had money from my part-time jobs, so I asked her to go to the movies on a Saturday early evening. She agreed. She lived on the other side of the Central Square Theater from me. It was walkable for both. So that night I went to her home, knocked on the door, and we walked to the movie theater. We talked about the school and the film we were about to see. It was pleasant, but not romantic. Elaine was a nice Catholic girl. Afterwards, I bought her an ice cream cone at Brigham's and walked her home. I think I kissed her at the door, and that put an end to what I thought of as my necessary first date and a necessary rite of passage to adulthood. There was another girl at Latin school, Ann F., who had a crush on me. She was a little zoftic, a Yiddish word if you don't know it, with larger hips and breasts, and therefore I had some interest. She lived in an expensive Cambridge neighborhood, Fresh Pond Parkway. In her junior year, she transferred to Holy Cross Academy in Brookline. It was a high-security school meant for the growing wealthy Boston Irish Catholic families to place their little princesses. The teaching sisters of Holy Cross were strict, and the location was safe from dirty Irish nobodies like me. Although she had transferred, she continued to keep in touch with me. And when the Holy Cross Academy Junior Prom came along, I was invited to be Ann's date. It was completely unexpected. I had never even seen a formal affair. I did not attend either my school's junior or senior prom. Although I had 2 part-time jobs, I had very little money for a prom and no dating experience except for Elaine V. Her father was a local lawyer who once ran and lost a bid for Middlesex County Register of Deeds. Mrs. F., Ann's mother, was an archetype for a certain kind of Irish-American social climber. In Boston at that time, there was at least 2 high societies and lots of animosity between them. There was the original Boston Brahmin kind that was made up of the Yankee Protestants who had descended from Boston's first settlers. They were wealthy families, often with inherited money. They had names like Adams and Cabot and Forbes, Appleton, Peabody, and Emerson. But there was a new Boston hierarchy forming, made up of Irish, American, and Catholic, industrial and political leaders, plus the nouveau riche. They had names like Kennedy and Fitzgerald and Flatley, McCormick, Logan, and Carney. There was also many Irish families that were wannabe Irish hierarchy. They were striving to belong to the Irish Brahmins, but had no extraordinary qualities. They were often entrepreneurs, but not well-known millionaires nor high political or commercial successes. Mrs. F. was trying to squeeze her tribe, her husband, and family into that Irish Brahmin category. I knew others like her. They were usually not nice people. Anne had told me that her mother would foot all my prom expenses, tickets, rent a tuxedo, flowers, and a car with chauffeur for the whole night. I was summoned by Mrs. F. long before the event. When I arrived at her home, she and I met alone without Anne. This meeting was a little like how cops interrogated me for some of my past nefarious misdemeanors. Only this was worse. Her plan, I think, was to put the fear of God into me so I would not kidnap, rape her daughter, and then sell her to a pimp. Or, worse yet, make a faux pas at this phony formal engagement. She asked what my father did for a living, how many siblings I had, what was my history with other girls, really personal stuff. She warned me not to kiss or touch her daughter inappropriately. It rankled me. It was a crude attempt to threaten me and make me feel unworthy. She was an unholy bitch. I withstood it and understood it to be another unhappy life experience. I had no bad intentions toward Anne. She was a nice girl with a nasty, grasping mother. I did not envy her. The event went well. No problems ensued. I was not an embarrassment to Anne or anyone else. I kept my opinions to myself. We danced. I met her stuck-up friends. The whole thing was theatrical and mechanical. Everyone putting on airs. I chalked it up to another rite of passage, and an uncomfortable one. Being a Roman Catholic caused me much anguish and guilt as I maneuvered my way through the awkward years of pubescence. After high school, my relations with girls became easier and more frequent. Although I am rather a plain guy, looks-wise, I have also always been fully confident. I have a huge personality, too much hubris, and I am unafraid to approach people, women included. In the end of it all, I was the luckiest guy in the world when I met and married my wife of 58 years, Jane. Signed, sealed, and